So the past 2 years, for whatever reason, up by the Charleston bump, there's been an enormous kind of
Hmm.
loop in the Gulf Stream where it's circled back to the southeast considerably and then shot back up north. And it's only been about 5 miles wide.
Wow.
So going from, basically completely between Florida to the Bahamas and then shriveled down to, 5 miles wide.
And how did it start out? Like, what was the origin story?
Too much alcohol.
Really? Okay.
Says if God wanted us to have fiberglass boats, he would have given us fiberglass trees.
It's for fishermen. It's not for taking the wife and the wife's friends.
I think that it's a really, really pretty bit.
And then there was a blur that went by and ended up in the cockpit, as far as if I can remember correctly.
Welcome back, everybody. State of Sportfishing podcast. Anthony Pino here with Hook Optics and presented by the Billfish Company. Today we have an exciting guest, Anthony Burns from ROFSS, analyst from ROFSS, and I know a lot of people have been waiting to hear about some sea surface condition analysis, and we got the people that pretty much pioneered it. So Anthony, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about ROFSS and tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate what you guys do with this podcast. I listen myself, and I think it's important, to talk to kind of the people in the industry, and put it down in video form. And it's a good listen. So I really appreciate what you guys do as well.
Thank you, man.
But yeah, absolutely. But yeah, my name is Anthony or AJ. I'm an analyst here at ROFSS. I started about 4 years ago, coming up in May. And what we do is we make fishing analyses. We look at satellite imagery, so sea surface temperature as well as ocean color chlorophyll. And then with that, we can basically determine the better places to fish. So for instance, if you're going out of, Jacksonville tomorrow, you give us a call or write us an email, or look on our website and say, hey, I'm going out of Jacksonville for Wahoo tomorrow. And we'll take a look at the satellite imagery for your area. And then with that, we can determine the best areas to fish, primarily using what we call water mass boundaries. So generally where cold water meets hot water is going to congregate the bait. And then kind of the trifecta is one of those water mass boundaries over good bottom for numerous days is going to provide the best area to fish for you. Yeah.
Like I said, I've been using, when I first started running the Blood Money, my boss and I were very reliant on ROFSS. And if anybody who's kind of just getting into the sport, I feel like ROFSS is the best way to go, because you kind of see what you're supposed to be looking for, and you guys' written analysis is a great tool as well, and trying to understand exactly what's going on and what to be looking for. So like in the future, maybe you're fishing an area in a different country, maybe that ROFSS doesn't work with or something like that, and you can kind of, now you've understood what you guys what we're looking for, you guys as an analyst and us as fishermen. So
right, the kind of the same standards apply wherever you go. Basically, you're looking for those edges over good bottom. But that is a great point, especially if you're just kind of starting out. We do provide you with a write-up as well as an image. In the write-up, we'll go over, generally what we've been seeing, the general currents or the movement of features and eddies. It's made mostly what we're looking for. And that can help you kind of figure out your area, or if you are going to a new area, kind of how features generally move. We were talking earlier, and that's really a pivotal moment, is kind of figuring out where your water generally moves, to be able to, not just follow the edge, but keep in front of it and keep working it, basically.
Yeah, because most places in the ocean, water does not stand still. And the
No.
idea, and people, I think that the general idea when you start to get into fishing is like, oh, I can just go to this spot and that's the spot to go. A bottom structure, typically some sort of bottom structure in the northeast of the mid-Atlantic, a canyon, below 100 fathom edge or 50 fathom edge, something like that. But the things that separate the boats that really do well and the boats that don't, I think, is the understanding of how water moves in certain things. The wind has a ridiculous amount to do with it. Generally how things move. For example, everybody thinks that our water in the mid-Atlantic, if you're not a fisherman, moves, it warms up from the south and then it cools off from the north, which is true, as in the Gulf Stream does move from the south and the Labrador current does come from the north. But if in the best of times, typically, some of our best fishing comes from the north, and there's big massive eddies that develop off of New York and east of New York. Like there's one now developing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that thing is what dreams are made of right now. It's been developed for like 3 weeks now. It's 68 degrees up east of Nantucket, 180 miles, 160 miles, something like that. That's
60-mile wide.
That's exactly what dreams are made of, man. So things that are stability, understanding the stability of like an eddy and a finger of an eddy versus like an entire eddy, or maybe a big area that like kind of the eddy rips off like over your left shoulder. That blended blue area there can be super productive for us. So, but yeah, man,
and it does differ between areas. Generally up north, like you say, there are those really big eddies that kind of form east of Georgia's banks there, and then they kind of work their way west and then southwest to a little bit. It can vary because the Gulf Stream is a little bit closer right there, but eventually it'll start interacting with the Gulf Stream down there off of like Norfolk Canyon or so.
Yeah.
And then even with the sailfish tournaments, we work those too, and we'll put the extra details in there because the Gulf Stream's going 2 to 4 miles an hour. So we'll say in the morning this is going to be where you're going to want to be, but either you're going to want to kind of jog north and set up on that same eddy, or work south.
Do those features like down there, like say there's a little piece of water that's pushed to the west over some some ideal sailfish 100 foot areas, do those features move with the Gulf Stream, like kind of slower than the Gulf Stream but still push north, or will they stay in one spot?
Oh yeah, no, they're ripping north with the Gulf Stream. So I mean, there will be eddies, and it's kind of we have to think about it a little bit, but it's like, okay, there's an eddy that's probably going to push through this area in like 2 hours. So like be ready and kind of hit it when you hit it. But and certainly the guys down in South Florida know that they'll see the water start boiling on the reef 100 yards down. It's like, okay, that's where this new current is basically going to push some water in, and then it's over in a couple hours. So the bite's going to be good, or it's about to shut down, so we need to catch them while we can, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And then, I mean, one thing that for everybody to remember is that these conditions, whatever they are fleeting conditions. When the good conditions finally develop, there's only a limited time, and there's not always telling about how long it's going to last, but it's a fleeting thing. So, I mean, more so than anything, like you have to get out there if you're serious about catching them. Being there when the conditions are right and getting out there is going to be the difference between a mediocre season and a great season. Being out there on a handful of days sometimes.
Right.
So
picking your days and seeing, oh, it does look really good, or it looks okay. Maybe I don't want to spend $800 on fuel, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're gonna do, I mean, if you guys here for entertainment. I don't know if this is the one. I think we're going to nerd out a pretty good amount over these sea surface shots.
Right.
And I like I was telling you before the pod, I look every day at the north from Cape Hatteras and to east of New York or east of Nantucket. I look every day. I don't care what time of year it is. It's just something that's inherent in me. If there's not a cloud in the sky, I'm looking, and I'm just praying that things are moving in the right direction. So
and
like,
we're praying there aren't clouds too.
Yeah,
so
yeah, 'cause the clouds.
If there's a rain dance, we're doing the no cloud, the clear sky dance
Yeah.
every day, especially during the big tournaments. And just pulling my hair out, praying the wind blows, clouds off or whatever during Big Rock. So
Yeah.
that is the one kind of caveat basically is with clouds, clouds are cold water, so those sensors can't see through a cloud. So
Mhm.
but we do have ways to get around that. And one of the great things is we're looking at a stack of imagery. So during the summer when quite a few areas are on, I'm looking at different areas. But let's say last summer I'm looking at Hudson, the Powell Canyon, basically every day for 3 months straight, kind of a thing. So
Mhm.
you get a really good idea of where things are going to be, even if it is a little bit cloudy. You can certainly make some really good educated guesses based off of the speed of things. So
How many analysts do you guys have at ROFSS?
we have 5. So there's the owner who also does analyses, and then 4 analysts.
And then do you guys divide up in the regions of do you guys have like certain regions of expertise or
Yeah, we end up falling into different areas. It certainly
Mhm.
becomes easier to look at one area for an extended period of time. When you first start, you just because like I said, everybody has their own fishery. So in the beginning, you got to kind of look at everything to figure out how things move in different places. And then everybody's at that point now. And so, I personally like to look at the north because things move a little bit slower. And then the south is, I've looked at that for a couple of years as well, and then we look at the Gulf and the Bahamas as well. So you bounce around, but it's certainly nice when you do get a look at the same stretch of water for a while.
I got you. So how many different regions does ROF offer nowadays?
Yeah, so we got the Gulf of Mexico, so Brownsville all the way over to Tampa. We have South Florida. We also have KSL for the Wahoo guys, and then that extends all the way up to the Gulf of Maine, and then we have the Bahamas, Cabo, Bermuda, Hawaii, and I think that's it. We're adding new areas every year. It's just kind of a demand thing, but certainly the kind of follow the big tournaments. But if you have an area, certainly drop us an email and say, hey, we've been fishing out here, and as long as we have enough people interested, we can pull the imagery for anywhere. It just has to be worth it. So
Gotcha.
Yeah,
fantastic. I'm sure any more people were asking from all over all sorts of places.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
So.
Grenada, we'll get Costa Rica certainly on the list, and all the good spots for sure.
So cool. So I think it's all important stuff to like, if you're gonna go fishing, you got to know. It just helps a lot more. It just takes away from the guesswork.
It is, and like you said, certainly before satellite imagery, guys were catching fish, right? You would go out and you would see the water, and you would kind of formulate your own game plan based off of what you can see. And now we just provide a wider view, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, the bottom fishing but looking at a good piece of bottom. So, you can just go out to the Hudson Canyon every day, and it is what it is. And
people
the
do
canyon,
that.
Yeah. And the canyon provides the bait. And so the predators will come in there. It's just when you can get that with some nice blue water over it, it's going to be lights out. So it's just the extra piece of it.
Yeah. It's just like anything, being in the right place at the right time. 2 hours in the right place versus all day in the wrong place is typically gonna be favorable, for the 2 hours. I've experienced this shoot. We've picked up and moved. I don't know. I think my record is like 7 times in Ocean City on one day of Ocean City
yeah.
fishing, and eventually you find the right thing, or maybe there's not enough features out there to stay in one spot. You fish it until it doesn't produce anymore, then you have to go looking for other features. So if you don't mind, I would really love to nerd out on some of these shots. And we were talking earlier about the Northeast, but I know I've had multiple requests for like South Carolina to Cape Hatteras too. So I don't know how easy those are to pull up. I know those
Gotcha.
are much more, those are quick moving
Yeah,
fisheries there.
Yeah, they're a little bit more dynamic, with the
Mhm.
Gulf Stream right there. Certainly with the Charleston bump right there, basically it forces the Gulf Stream out, and it generally creates these massive eddies in that area, which can be, anywhere from 40 to 60 miles. So there can be huge eddies pretty much from Charleston up to Cape Hatteras there.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened last year with Big Rock. It was like, oh man, basically an eddy sat out front there for like a week, and it was, where's the best place to go? And it's like, well, the really good water is in 30 fathoms, but that's not really
Yeah.
prime choice for blue marlin. So your only option is fishing the kind of blue to blended blue eddy core, or going all the way up to the stream, So it's always interesting. But yeah, we could look at something. And I got fishing stories too, if you want to go over that. I pretty much grew up. Yeah, I grew up fishing out of San Diego on long range tuna trips.
Oh, I got you.
So if you want to talk about that, I can talk about
Yeah,
that for hours. So.
My girlfriend has been begging me. She used to work out in LA, and she used to do those I would say long range, but medium range, day and a half, 2-day trips.
Okay. Yeah.
And she's been begging me to go out there. I
love that fishery, man. It's super special, particularly right now with that bluefin out there. It's amazing. And then getting out, it's I'd say it's world class, getting out after those tuna. If you can go out for, a couple grand basically, and come home with, a literal ton of yellowfin tuna kind of a deal. It's well worth the money to go out for 7 days and eat, like a king basically, and just catch fish. It's an amazing fishery.
And then even the 2-day, like 2-3 day bluefin trips they're like super the value is incredible for those things. It's like $800 for like 3 days of fishing. It's ridiculous, and food included. Right. So, and then it's pretty wild. So cool. Well, let's delve into the analysis a little bit, and you could screen it. I'll shoot the host back over to you. Hopefully it doesn't ruin everything. And we'll jump into some of these. I don't think we ruined anything. So we'll jump into some of these charts. My girlfriend, who loves fishing, hates all I do in the evening, in the summer more so, is call people and analyze shots.
Yeah. And that's a great point. We're definitely a piece of the pie, and part of our I guess our value at ROFSS too is we have a bunch of clients that we basically get a call and say, in ground truth more or less, and say, hey, how was it out there? Or, is it kind of shaping up how we said it was?
Yeah.
So we can, further dial in the best place, because all we get, is the ocean view. But if you can get kind of boots on the ground and say, it was a little bit better in this canyon versus that canyon, that's, we strive to get all the data we can basically to provide you the best analysis. So here's that. Did it work?
Oh man, that's wildly better than what it looks like now.
Yeah, just a little bit. So this is that September day.
Okay. Do you have
September 20th or so?
Do you have the can you get down to outside the Washington with that one? No, you got to get down a little further.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. It's like a treasure trove for me. This is incredible.
It is wild, the amount of like catch data basically. Even just the reports and stuff. If you really wanted to go through and, for the past 5 years, I was talking to a guy about the Gulf, you're not supposed to target bluefin, but if you were, if, it hits a certain temperature, in April kind of a thing,
Mhm.
you can accidentally catch
Quite a few.
bluefin.
I've
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
did recently hear it's been pretty favorable out of Texas, I believe.
Okay.
So cool. This is the shot from this is late September, early September.
9:20.
9:20. All right.
Yep.
So basically, I remember this is our best day. I don't know, we had some pretty great days last year considering the fishing. But for everybody who's watching on YouTube and for you people listening, you should just probably watch this episode on YouTube because
Yeah.
so this had been a piece of water, this area. Do you have the Loran? Now I'm getting really really into it.
Yeah, of course it was on. That's, like I said, everything, just about every day that area's on. So we get a good look at it.
Cool. All right. So I mean, this is an example of a pretty obvious thing to do. I think we were like out there, if I can remember correctly. So everybody who's watching, is basically the Gulf Stream's running south and north.
Yeah, the Gulf Stream is
out there about 108, 110 miles out of Ocean City, which is actually kind of ridiculously close. And it's kind of wild that we didn't have better fishing with how close that is, but we just never had enough east wind to push much more than what we have here. This was the most favorable conditions at Ocean City for the entire year was this week. And this fishing basically started up above outside the Baltimore, and it kind of pushed down, maintaining the same shape that you're looking at now. So this trip that we did was an overnighter trip on the Blood Money, and I kind of was looking at this water. I mean, it's just the kind of a combination of stability.
Yeah.
It was just something that was super stable, super consistent. I had a couple reports that I had got from people, and we'd fished a fair amount leading up to this, and we kind of beat this area from basically from the 000s. We started fishing the area. It was on the 150 almost outside the Baltimore, down to like in the early September, and then down to our last great trip was like the 750, 800 line down what those two number 5s are. Can you explain the dots and the numbers for everybody?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess while we got it pulled up, this would be a great opportunity to go over this. So with each analysis you get, we'll give you a write-up basically of what we've been seeing in the area. And the analysis is a forecast for the next day. So it's also forecasting where we think things will be tomorrow. And that kind of plays into what I was saying earlier. So up north, things move a little bit slower, but certainly down south, things can move relatively quickly, especially off of Florida, where the Gulf Stream is pinched between Florida and the Bahamas. Things can move relatively quickly. And then we'll break it up, by area, basically. So we got Poor Man's to Spencer Canyon here, and then Poor Man's to Norfolk. So Poor Man's north, Poor Man's south, basically. Gotcha. And then the write-up just includes where we think the best places are going to be. And then these coordinates, Loran coordinates here, line up with the dots on the map. And we explain, what areas we think are best and why. And then, so the lines are the water mass boundaries. So where the temperature changes from 76 to 77. And then the dots are what we call hotspot areas, or where we think is best. And then finally, the numbers within the dots indicate how many days that area has been favorable. So generally, if an edge has been over good bottom, The longer it's been over the good bottom, the longer it's allowed bait to congregate in the area, basically. So it's generally, an 8. If all other things equal, an 8 is generally going to be better than a 2.
Yeah.
You get up to 10, and then it starts getting a little squirrely because by then certainly the predators have found generally that pile of bait,
And also
and they
other
will.
fishermen.
Yeah, and certainly other fishermen have worked it. But that's just kind of the general philosophy of what we do here.
Cool.
And then
Actually,
we have arrows that indicate the general current through the area, and then the color as well on this shot. And then we also provide a clear chlorophyll or ocean color shot as well.
can we actually go to the, I guess, early, like if there's a shot for the 2nd of September, so we can actually kind of explain the progression of how all this water moved and everything like that.
Pretty good. So it's all pretty warm. But...
So sliding up here, I can't remember if this was a different piece of water that we started fishing, but this water outside, as you guys can see, the shot is super yellow, which all means it's all generally the same temperature. And this is where, come a certain time of the year, you got to stop looking at the temperature and start looking at the water and where the water had come from, or the water quality more so than the water temperature. The water temperature is indicative of where the water might come from. If the water's warmer, typically, as you can see in the top right corner, we have an eddy, a very, what I would say, mediocre, if not disappointing eddy, pulling a little bit of Gulf Stream to the west and spinning up, and you see the 3s and 4s outside the 42 200 or 400 down to the 300. So we had a great day. We fished here, and I had started. We'd basically fished this day for almost 3 days in a row, and it kind of got better, and for us it got better and better, mainly because I kind of understood what was happening. But the last day we were 8 for 18 on white marlins, 18 or 20. Nice. We were pretty awful at fishing, but good at getting bites. So, we ran basically to this number 4 that we can see outside the 42 200 and outside the Wilmington. And we picked a double, picked a single and a double. We caught only one out of that, and then I kind of understood that the fish were kind of riding in on that current, and I found myself at the easterly most side of the fleet most of the day, and we ended up catching, having almost 20 bites, and most of it, 80% of it, was right there pushing into the current east of most of the fleet that was there that day. And then at the end of the day, and this is what I think a lot of people don't realize, that was kind of in the main current, but this little area where this down on the 290 and that little black dot right there, there was a couple boats there that had some incredible conditions. And I think that sometimes it helps to get the fish out of that incoming current. And if there's a piece of similar water, but has less current in it, it seems to do really well for us. And so we had like a dozen bites in that bluer water pushing into it, and then it kind of fizzled out. I don't know if the fish were just, that group of fish, it kind of fizzled out and pushed past me, or there just wasn't that many. There wasn't any left. There wasn't a whole pile of bait in that area. It was just kind of fish there. But then I ran to the southern end of that, down on the 290. It looked like kind of a more blended water.
Correct.
Yep. And found myself in an area with a couple other boats. As you guys could see it outside the Wilmington there, in the chlorophyll shot, you can see kind of the main, that little finger that pushed to the south a little bit outside the dump site. Yeah. And I ran there, and the water was kind of a little bit more stagnant. There wasn't as much westerly current. but the bait was there and the tunas were there, and there was another 6 bites of white marlins that we only caught 2, but there was an immense amount of life. So I ran down there probably 8 miles, kind of out of over eavesdropping on a couple people on the radio and kind of thinking, oh, that kind of, I've been successful in those little areas south, outside of those main incoming currents sometimes. So
Yeah, absolutely.
those are some really good days. And I don't know, it was just one day it kind of worked out for us. But I think in the morning when we first got there, being pointed east into that prevailing current was a big deal. And I only remember that because years ago, I watched the Billfisher and Big Wave Dave on the wound up in a similar situation, but outside the Norfolk in a much prettier condition than there, do the same thing. And I was too young and dumb to realize what was going on. But after 8 years, I kind of figured it out. But that I remember them catching a fish and then putting their bow right back into the current, and just not really like staying and working the same side, just catching a fish, doing a couple turns, and then if nothing good happens, they were pointed to the southeast, and similar situation to that.
Gotcha.
So that was a pretty good. It doesn't really look that. This was the best conditions we had all year. I mean, typically this is a mid-July sort of condition that we would have this sort of fishing, but man, we just didn't. This is end of September, and this was as good as it got. And we did have some incredible stuff going on. There's plenty of tunas, plenty of white marlins, even white marlins cutting on those little sardines at certain points. So it was really great stuff. Ideally, we would like that mass of blue water in the top right to push into the canyon, to the Wilmington and the Baltimore Canyon, but it just never happened for some reason. It just stayed outside that 100 fathom line most of the year, and it was just a tough thing for us.
Those big clockwise rotating eddies, they form basically, like I said, east of Georgia's, work their way down and then start heading south. But you mentioned earlier with the Gulf Stream right here, in particular, it will start to pull those off back to the east before they can really work all their way down. And
they almost unwind and actually change the current and pull it back out if they're close enough.
Yep. Yeah. There's too much interaction to where there's not enough energy basically, because that eddy's been more or less separated, and there's only this 81 degree water, and the current velocity basically isn't enough to hold itself together, and it'll start getting influenced by the Gulf Stream over here. Yeah. And then throughout the year, how far north this pushes before it starts really curving to the east also moves. So it we can generally predict it a little bit, but there's certainly a lot of interaction that can differ from year to year.
Yeah. How do these eddies, and I mean any eddy from the ones to the south, the smaller, faster moving ones south of Cape Hatteras, and the much bigger ones to the north, how do they formed, AJ? Like, I've always wondered. My theory is that big winter storms typically form them, but that's just a theory of mine. You can probably tell me. Yeah,
and we'll actually I'll send you something that's like a little movie that can basically show one of those big ones up to the northeast form, or one of the larger like loop current eddies, and how those generally form. But the Gulf Stream or the loop current basically curves so much and creates almost a U shape, which then breaks off and creates its own circle for those larger eddies. Yeah. And then the smaller, what we call frontal eddies, so the little ones along either side of the Gulf Stream basically, those will form in different cases. A lot of the times the ones to the south, they actually form coming through the Yucatan Channel, so where it gets pinched between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. There's basically forces through there that will spin off eddies on the western side, which then ride, all the way up around the loop current, all the way around past Florida and all the way up. So a lot of those eddies, they'll start all the way down basically off of Mexico or sometimes in the Gulf, depending on what's going on, and then ride all the way up. Wow. Sometimes with the different capes, Cape Hatteras, Cape Fear, they'll get pinched in there if there's, a big feature off to the west. Sometimes they'll get pinched and they'll kind of disintegrate. But a lot of the times we can follow those eddies pretty much all the way up from Mexico and all the way around and all the way, off to wherever, basically off the mid-Atlantic. So
interesting. I never looked at it that. I like to think that
broad
I look
scale,
at things pretty broad scale, but not that macro.
Right.
So,
we get a big view. Luckily, it's interesting. Yeah, we were. I was just reading a paper, and they were talking the Charleston bump out there. They actually, before satellite imagery, they basically thought the Charleston gyre was there more or less all of the time, because every time they went out there was a big eddy, and it just so happens that they form so often through that area, but it's not like a solitary feature. And, one forms and pushes up, once every 2 weeks or whatever it is. So it's interesting. Wow.
Dude, I'm fascinated by it. Like, I could talk, like I said, we're probably nerding out for a lot of people, but I don't really care because this shit's, that's just what I live for.
For me personally, and kind of my background or whatever is I love to fish, and my dad is a science teacher. And so trying to apply the science of how to catch these damn things has really been my entire life. Like, I really love fishing, and science is really cool. And basically my whole life has been, how do I use science to learn how to catch more fish?
Do you think that most fishermen are genuinely scientists? Like in a way, like, especially
for sure,
the better ones, especially,
Yep, absolutely. Learning how to read the water and all that, and every marlin fisherman, could probably school a scientist on the minutia of billfish behavior, basically, and how they're going to react, or where they want it. A lot of the times, and this is a lot of marine biology, is fishermen know these things, and then 20 years later we get to go, eureka, we proved it with fancy math, basically, kind of a deal. But until you prove it with fancy math, it's just anecdotal. Is there anything else with these kind of images? Let's do example.
Can we find one in between this one, like maybe the 10th or the 12th or something like that? Absolutely. And then show people kind of how it kind of developed. And these are the best days I had this summer. But I thought that those, that's something completely different. So there had to have been some sort of weather event that, if I can remember correctly, an east wind or something that made this happen here. Because this was, you can still see up outside the Baltimore where that eddy used to be, but it's kind of getting crushed by the Gulf Stream.
Correct. There's this giant eddy that pushed up through here, and it just sucked this other eddy out, basically, like you said, and crushed it. And in general, we like, we'll go back here, in something like this, where this blue water is pushing inshore, like you said, that's generally the best area. We like kind of the leading edges of the eddy filament, so where it's just starting to push in. And then certainly those areas more than this offshore flow of dirtier, greener water.
And
generally indicate scattered action.
And then the leading edge is depending on which direction, because this eddy from the north outside the Wilmington is a north to south moving piece of water, whereas so you're going to want to be on more the southwest corner of things. Whereas the eddy in the 15th picture, the one we were just looking at, the more the Gulf Stream eddy, you're kind of going to be wanting to be on the northwest corner of things.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the kind of the leading edge of that Gulf Stream eddy. And there was actually I can't remember who, but I just saw a great video of this guy fishing. Like, you can see he posted his track, basically, and he's just slowly zigzagging northwest, basically perfectly following the eddy filament as it continues to push northwest. So it was a great visualization. But
so, and then so that was, if I can remember correctly, when this piece of water pushed in the way it was, this is a complete anomaly out of Ocean City to have the Gulf Stream do something like this. So but when it does, I have found when we do get a push like this, I have found that the blue marlin fishing is considerably better coming from the southeast and east straight off the Gulf Stream versus to the north in the other eddy, in the smaller eddy. That seems like the white marlin fishing and the tuna fishing is considerably better, where there's a lot more mahis and blue marlin in the southerly the water that comes from the south and the east directly up the Gulf Stream. It seems like those species of fish tend to, the whites and the tunas prefer a little bit stabler, more slower moving body of water, where the blues kind of roll with the current.
Especially, early in the season, they're kind of following the mahi up kind of a deal. But they're going to want, there's a great research paper out, but we figured this out a long time ago, but every species has their preferred habitat kind of a deal. And marlin are going to want, above 74 degrees. And generally, the cleaner Gulf Stream related water is better. That's not to say they won't follow those eddies in. But, just in a generalization, those tunas will, they don't mind a little bit more blended water. They'll, sit on a good piece of bottom and bait inshore, and bluefin just kind of do whatever they want. They're super fun to make analyses for inshore, but
I mean, especially the giants. I've seen giants and pieces of water like that 82-degree pretty blue water we're looking at right there. Seeing them out there.
That's it. It's and they, especially in spring, we can really hone in, kind of where they're going to be, and they'll just kind of be anywhere. Is the problem. We can put you on a lot of, bluefin looking water. It's just hard sometimes to pick the best bluefin water when they can be, just sitting on a piece of bottom, or they can be sitting out in the Gulf Stream, or so we gotta let you know based off of what we can see and the reports that we're getting to put you on the best spot. But and then I guess another, probably one of the more important things that we provide, so we'll give you this analysis. We like to send it out at least half an hour before we close. So if you do have any questions, we can talk to you. You can always talk to a physical person when you receive your analysis. So if you do have questions, or you do want to game plan something, by all means, give us a call, and we'll talk it over with you.
You can also call them via satellite phone, because I've done that before, back when Mitch was still running the show, and that was back when we still had to print the things out and take them with us. Not now it's on our phone. Not so much the faxes.
Okay.
But just
I guess you're not
2010s, we were still like, they weren't on a tablet yet. We're on our phone. It was still printed out, and call we Mitch.
Still send probably 2 faxes a year, but so you'll get your analysis, and then the following day between 10:30 and 12, you can call us, and we'll give you, so the imagery that we get is near real time, so it's about 2 hours old, but we can give you an up-to-date, basically right then, update of the conditions. So if things, did move a little wonky from the forecast, or, you're saying, oh, this is pretty good, but what about this plan B? Or maybe I should sit tight here. Things, things may change. So you can always give us a call, and we'll give you an up-to-date update, basically, of the conditions as well. And that's a huge part of our business, being able to get that same day while you're out on the water as well. We also do inReach. We have an inReach number for that as well.
Okay.
So,
And how often did the satellites pass over a certain area?
That's a great question. So we use, I guess they aren't our satellites. but we utilize, I would say, maybe around 10 satellites, certainly the most out of anybody doing this. We have 10 satellites, which give us approximately 20 to 25 sea surface temperature shots and around 6 chlorophyll shots.
And that's a day.
That per day. Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Yep. So we're putting together stacks and we can see things move, basically not quite by the hour, but certainly, things moving slowly along throughout the day.
And you can also
and
piece together
correct. Yes.
maybe a shot that in the
Yep.
morning didn't have clouds
Yep.
over one side and the other side.
Yep. We can always create a composite, so we can provide you with a clear view of the area, instead of trying to piece that together yourself. So all of our analyses, we generally try and create them essentially as late as possible, so you have the most recent imagery as possible. But we'll create an analysis for you, like using a composite image a lot of the time, just because there's normally some moisture in the air, some clouds, pushing through most areas. We do get those perfect bluebird skies, and they're a godsend we're thankful for. But a lot of the times it is kind of cloudy, or in the summer we'll get that stupid Saharan dust that'll mess with the satellite imagery. Of course, there's the fog, that'll roll in up north, off of New York and all that stuff. So, but usually we'll figure out a way. We can always come up with something normally. And then we also partnered with Fathom Science, and they provide basically the top of the line modeling data. So if it is completely cloudy for generally more than 3 days, it starts to get pretty squirrely. So then we can provide a modeled analysis, which we gone through and had about a 2-month vetting period, and it all lines up really well. So we can also provide a modeled analysis as well.
Cool. Well, and then so this is, I think that this piece of water pushed in off of East Breeze, and kind of, I remember people going. I just remember seeing that after the clouds cleared and being like, "Oh my God,
yeah,
this is going to be it," And then people went out to there, and it really wasn't that great until the Gulf Stream kind of straightened out again, and it kind of sat there a little bit, and then it became more stable. And I felt like the fish, I don't know if it's probably more that we covered enough ground as a fleet from Cape May, Ocean City, and Virginia to finally just find the right spot, which ended up being on the last shot, the 22nd shot, which ended up being for us on the blood money, which was the best fishing. As that stuff was starting to push out down on those 3 5s on the 2 5s and the 800 to the 750. We had some incredible blue marlin fishing one day. Caught 4 out of 5, which is a decent, more than a decent day.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And had a handful of white marlin bites too. But that was kind of, I set out. I remember, setting out on that 80, that 70, like in that little area, but on the southern 5, where I guess it's a 79 degree in between the 78 and the 80 degree. And I got there, and it was just the faintest of weed lines. And I wanted one thing for people, when you're going offshore and you're not fishing, you're fishing these surface conditions. It really, really helps if it's calm. Like when you're looking at this, sometimes that these features that a weed line or that you guys mark like this are not quite as easy to see. So if you're out there in deep water fishing these surface conditions, it really helps if it's calm. I've had days where people have gone out and I've chased a bite, and been the one had the bite on a super calm day, and then people get out there and it's 10 to 20 knots, and it's just not what it was. I mean, some days when you're going to go off adventuring out in the deep, in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, in the Northeast, you want it to be be calm. If it's going to be rougher, maybe try to find something that where the water overlaps into some structure to kind of hold
Right.
things together, because sometimes it's quite fragile out there. Is what
Yeah,
what I've
we call it wind mixing, and
Mhm.
that's probably a lot of why this. I mean, the eddy has certainly moved north, and this is all stretched out a little bit, but it's a little bit more of a blue green now,
Yeah.
and wind mixing will occur the further away that Gulf Stream that's feeding it extends. And then a great point that I always mention: if you have this feature on your fish finder, please put it on to where you can track the temperature, basically. So it creates a little line where it goes and it'll show you, if you drive over on your chart, it'll show you the temperature change. Because otherwise, you got to really keep an eye on just the number as it changes. Because I'm sure, as you know, a half degree edge can be huge sometimes.
Sometimes
If it is, yeah.
on the days where there's really, like, in years like this where you're running out there in the deep looking for just praying for something. Every little hump in that line graph can be something. It's crazy.
Signs of life.
The sort of stuff I found myself being able to set out on and catch some fish on. It's super minuscule, and the line graph is a huge tool. I'm really not happy you said that, but
Oh no, we can cut that out, right?
no, it's an incredible tool. I think it's
Yeah.
most fish finders have them now. Most of the Garmin's and the Furunos, Simrads have them now, and they're just kind of, it's a little bit more visual cue.
Yeah.
Help you notice some of the small stuff, because sometimes it's very bland out there. Sometimes it all looks really good, and sometimes it all looks really shitty.
Yeah.
And you're looking for just something, anything, any sort of difference, and sometimes even a difference that the satellite doesn't pick up as well. So
right, and that's all these these water mass boundaries, these lines basically are those convergence zones. So that's where your weed lines are generally going to stack up, or where there might be a slick, or where the water is going to look a little bit different, or that kind of a thing. But yeah, I've just had too many guys call me the day of and go, yeah, we generally ask, where are you, so we can kind of make a game plan for you.
yeah,
And they're 20 miles east of where I told them to fish, and they just drove right past it. I'm like, oh no, like like, keep an eye on your temperature gauge, man. They're like, oh yeah, I look down and look up and it's 2 degrees warmer, and I'm like, well, go back to where the edge is, basically, kind of deal. So you just gotta pay a little bit of attention to that, because that's what you're looking for. And then another small detail with our analyses: the ocean does warm up throughout the day. So we always tell people, you're looking for that relative change rather than the absolute number. So don't stop or start fishing, I guess, and keep waiting for 80 degrees and it keeps saying 79.5 for 15 miles, kind of a deal. It's the relative change rather than the absolute temperature.
Have you noticed that sometimes the green water can warm up far quicker than the blue water? Like, over the course of a day, I've been in, sometimes we just have to fish in the green water, and like some days it'll start in like at 68 degrees, and by the end of the day it's like 73, 74. I've found, like, it's just wild how sometimes the sun can warm up the green water much more rapidly than the blue.
Yeah, that Gulf Stream water is kind of stable, and it's all moving, so it's all relatively, like, homogeneous, where that inshore water can certainly be a little bit more susceptible, I guess, because it's also shallower, so it's easier to warm something like that up. But then I've certainly inshore water gets a lot colder. Some of the most interesting days, I'll say, come off of when I'm looking at Hudson to hydrographer, and there's a big rain, and just this giant green water plume moves south 20, 30 miles overnight, basically. And I'm like, well, but it's the conditions are always changing, but we're able to track it pretty well.
What's the wildest anomaly you've seen?
That's a great question. I was thinking you might ask me what's the craziest thing I've seen. Yeah, so every year is different, and I feel like I'm generally not confused, but in awe of the things the ocean does. So the past 2 years, for whatever reason, up by the Charleston bump, there's been an enormous kind of
Mhm.
loop in the Gulf Stream where it's circled back to the southeast considerably and then shot back up north, and it's only been about 5 miles wide.
Wow.
So going from basically completely between Florida to the Bahamas, and then shriveled down to 5 miles wide. Or recently in February, for whatever reason, the loop current generally extends north through the Yucatan Peninsula, goes up however far and curves back down. But an enormous filament extended like 80 miles to the west and then formed a counterclockwise rotating eddy, which is completely opposite of what it normally does.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of what's normal and what's not normal. So there's definitely a lot of head scratchers, and it normally we can see things that are normal, but it certainly does really weird stuff that probably nobody else sees but us, kind of a deal. But
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing to think that you could basically swim across the Gulf Stream this spring, kind of a
Yeah.
deal, if you wanted to.
Pretty wild
Weird things
stuff.
like that.
I remember
Yeah.
I remember one year, I don't remember what it was, 2013, 14, maybe somewhere like that. But there had been some water that came out of the Delaware Bay that extended all the way down to inside the Washington Canyon. And it was like brown, you could see it, it was like brown water.
Yeah.
And inside it was a hard edge, and like it was an east breeze or east wind for a couple of days, and it blew some blue water in over the Washington, the southwest corner of the Washington specifically. And they had some really good white marlin fishing there, and the poor girls. And I was at the dock that day, and some boats came in with 6, 7, 8, having some decent fish, some really decent fishing, and the blue water, overnight the wind had switched to the southwest, and it pushed that literally brown water over where they were
Yeah.
fishing, and the fish were not there. I think that maybe, I don't know if the water just kind of the top section, but whatever it was fucked, and we
Yeah.
had the fish further offshore, and the fishing wasn't nearly as good.
Yep.
So
That'll certainly happen. You mentioned that, but the brown water, the density is different. So there'll be
yeah.
basically the brown water on top. But yeah, that'll happen in the Gulf too. We'll see brown water extend south off the Mississippi Delta as far like
Mhm.
if you went west out of Naples, you'd get out to Mississippi brown water sometimes. Like it's insane. These basically 80 miles of this Mississippi water just heading straight south, miles and miles sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Do you know if water typically push over water, or is it just like is it pretty, like, does it extend down like 20, 30, or 100 feet? Like, is it like just the top, or like on the,
to a certain extent, yeah. So
yeah.
the further the deeper it gets, it would probably become shallower and
Mhm.
shallower.
Gotcha.
We can't really see that with our satellite imagery. It's just
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
surface thing, but for sure, it probably gets thinner in terms of horizontally the further south it gets.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's not an exact science, that's for sure. As much as
Yeah.
we'd like to think it's a science. So everybody who's listening, right, whoever runs a boat or fishes on a boat, just be nice to your captain or sea surface analyst, because it's not a perfect science.
Where it's a piece of the pie,
Yeah.
we can put you in the best spot based off of what we can see, and then we're very proud of our clients and stuff like that. But we certainly understand we're a piece of the pie, and you guys are the ones out there executing, to win the tournaments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But,
Well, cool, AJ. I appreciate it,
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Good fun. I hope that
Absolutely.
people learned a little bit. I certainly did. So, like I said, I can nerd out on this for hours. So,
Yeah, always, like I said, give us a call. We have a bunch of YouTube videos we put up, just going over simple stuff, how to order. And then we're also, we put out right now Gulf of Mexico in the southeastern United States, just like a big overview, essentially, of the area, so we can see what general features are in the area, just to kind of churn things up to get guys out. And then we'll start doing the north videos as well. And then we just put out a Bahamas special for those of you guys going fishing the Bahamas for the spring. Is always pretty interesting. Basically, we look for that kind of nicer Bahamas blue water that'll push in. So when the marlin are down south and they start to migrate north, they'll generally follow what we call blue marlin water. It's a little bit warmer, up off of Cat, and then around Eleuthera, and then Abaco, and then eventually get out into the Gulf Stream to work up north. So every year we look at kind of how much of that water is in the area. And right now it was a little bit slow in the beginning, but it's getting better. And that water is pushing in off of Eleuthera and Abaco. And then we also look at the Northern Atlantic Oscillation is what it's called. So it's like a climate thing like El Nino, La Nina. And there's one of those in the Atlantic as well. And they can roughly predict the wind. So this year it's looking like it's going to be a little bit warmer and a little bit less wind out of the west. So thank God. Last year it was, we put out a north special, and sure enough it said, there might be a lot of wind out of the west, and sure enough it kind of happened. And then off of Norfolk and up to the Washington, the white marlin just kind of skipped out and kept going north on the Gulf Stream, I guess. So
well, that's hopefully,
so those are really,
that are they pretty accurate? Like,
I mean, you can read into the tea leaves, but they're generally pretty accurate, in terms of just a forecast for the conditions. Fish can do whatever fish want to do. But in terms of the condition, which is all we do, but based on the conditions, the predictions are relatively accurate for the atmospheric and ocean conditions. So it's lined up pretty well. So definitely take a look at those as well. We'll all be out fishing anyway, but it might give you a good idea of kind of what to expect. But this year is looking a little bit better than last year. It's a little bit warmer, and it might be a little bit of a late start, but hopefully there will be a little bit less west wind. So
west wind,
some good fishing. Yes,
less
please.
west wind up here. Well, AJ, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And
absolutely.
Good fun, dude. So thank you.
Yeah.
If you guys have any ROFSS, if you haven't heard about them, then you're probably fishing in the wrong spots. I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Cool. You can hit us up on ROFSS.com is our website. We got an email and all the different social media, probably other than Twitter, because who wants to hear a story from an analyst? But all the good pictures and all the good pictures of our clients and all that stuff. Cool. So you can find us there too. But thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Check them out, guys. Thank you.